In this video, I'm going to show you how to implement pagination in Flutter with the BLoC pattern. We will use the Flutter BLoC library, and it has something called as a Cubit, which is an extension over the BLoC, and it makes the implementation of the BLoC patterns simpler and faster. Pagination helps in creating better performant network dependent apps. So if an app fetches a lot of data from the internet and shows them in a list, then paginating that list will make the app faster. With pagination, we fetch small chunks of data from the internet and we show it in the app, and anything that the user might not see is not fetched, which reduces the amount of data that we are getting from the internet. And when a user scrolls a list of data to the end, then we make another request to get the next set of data, and when we receive that data, we add it to the list and the user can then interact with it. Pagination overall contributes to a better user experience, and we are going to implement it today. You can find the code of this video in a GitHub repo. I have it linked in the description. Now let's get started. We will use this JSON placeholder.typicode.com to get a fake JSON array that we will be paginating in our app. And this JSON placeholder has this posts route that we will be using in the app. And if we go here, then we can see that we have around 100 JSON objects. But we will not be fetching all of this 100 objects at once in the application. We have to fetch it in chunks. And to fetch it in chunks, we have this underscore limit parameter that we can pass to this posts route. And the limit can be anything. So if I pass the limit 15, then it is only going to fetch us the first 15 objects. And we will show this 15 objects in a list in the application, and when the list is scrolled to the bottom, then we will fetch the next 15 results. So how are we going to fetch the next 15 results? If we put the limit to 30, then what will this do is it will give us the first 30 results, but we don't want this. Since we have already received the first 15 objects, we don't want to fetch them again, otherwise it will require internet connection and the whole point of pagination will be pointless if we are fetching everything together. So instead of fetching all of this 30 at once, how can we fetch the next 15, that is from 16 to 30? And for that we can pass here underscore page parameter. And if I pass page as 1, then it will return the first 30 objects since the limit is 30. And if I pass 2, then it will fetch me the next 30 results. So if I run this, then I should get the JSON array from 31 to 60. And that does happen. And then if I change the page to 3, then it will be 61 to 90. And if I set it to 4, then that will give me 91 to 100. So this is how we will be fetching our data in chunks in the application. If this is clear, then open up command prompt and create the project. Run flutter create pagination app or anything that you want to name it. And now open the project in VS Code. If you are on Windows, then you can run the command code space the name of your project, and that will automatically open it in VS Code. Go to the pubspec.yaml file, and here we will be adding the Flutter BLoC and HTTP library, but I'll do it in a better way. Go to this extensions section and install this pubspec assist extension. This makes adding dependencies in pubspec YAML file very simple. So if you have it installed, then go to the YAML file and here press Ctrl+Shift+P, search for add/update dependencies and type in the name of the package that you want to add. And that will automatically add the package with the correct version number. And now add the Flutter BLoC dependency and save the project. That will install the dependency. In the lib folder, go to main.dart and here delete everything. Import the material.dart, create the main function, run app, and the name of our app is going to be Pagination app. let's create this stateless widget, and we are going to return a material app from here. The home of this material app will be the posts screen that will be displaying all the posts fetched from the internet. And I'm going to create that widget in a separate file. So inside the lib, create a folder named presentation, and inside the presentation create the Dart file. I'm going to name it posts_screen . Here import the material.dart and create a stateless widget, posts view. This widget will return a scaffold. It will also have an app bar, and the app bar will have a title that will say posts. And now go to main.dart, provide the posts view to this home. Before we write any more code, let's first create the qubits, the repositories, the services, models, and everything that we are going to need. On the lib folder, right click, and if you have installed the BLoC extension, then you will see this new Cubit button. And if you do not know what BLoC is and what the BLoC pattern is in Flutter, then do check out my other video. I have explained the BLoC pattern completely with an example. It's a very long video, so if you do not know what the BLoC pattern is, then you can watch that. The name that I'm going to give to my Cubit here is posts, and that should create the posts qubit in this new Cubit folder automatically. We will come to this post state and post qubit in some time, but let's first create the repository, the service, and the model. I'm going to store all of that in a separate folder, and that will be data. Inside the data, create another folder that should hold all the repositories, but in this application we are only going to have a single repository that I'll name posts_repository . In here, create a class named posts repository. We will come to the implementation of this posts repository in some time too. Create another folder for the services that the app is going to have, and inside this create a Dart file named posts_service . And then we will need a model that will convert the JSON into a Dart object, and that will be stored in a separate folder as well, which will be named models. Inside this, create a file named post.dart. Create a class named post. This class is going to contain a few members, and what are they going to be? Open the JSON placeholder.com/posts, and every object here has these 4 values to it, but we are only going to work with the ID, the title, and the body. So create variables that will store these values in this class. A final string named title, one will be body, and another one will be an integer named ID. We will not have a constructor to create objects of this class. Instead, we will directly create objects from the JSON that we will be getting from the internet. So create this post.fromJSON that will take a map object named JSON here, and the title will be equals to JSON. The key is title. The body will also be retrieved from the JSON with the key body, and then the ID. The key names must match what we have in these objects in this array. I think in the post service I did not create the class that will make the network requests. So create a class named posts service in this post service.dart file and just leave it like this. Now I am going to provide this posts qubit to the posts view here, and to do that we will have to go to the main.dart and here just wrap this posts view with a BLoC provider, and in the create function return an object of the posts qubit. BLoC provider isn't defined for the type pagination app. Why is okay? I think we'll have to import this. Yes. Now go to the posts underscore state dot dart, and here we will create all the states that our posts qubit will be able to emit. So by default, the state is going to be posts initial, and we are going to have a states named posts loaded. This state will be emitted every time we fetch an array of data from the JSON Typicode.com. Make the state extend the abstract state, that is posts state. This state will also contain a list of posts that we will fetch from the internet, and our UI will observe this state and show this list of posts on the UI. I'm gonna name this posts, press Ctrl dot and import this model, and then press Ctrl dot on the variable name, create the constructor. And I'm going to have another state named posts loading. This state will be emitted when we are fetching the data from the internet. Here as well, create a list of posts, and I'm going to name this old posts. This old posts will hold the data that is already fetched. For example, when the app launches, we are going to fetch the posts data from the internet, and then we will show that in a list. And when that list is scrolled to the bottom, then we are going to fetch another list. But if we are emitting a new state, then we will lose the previous state, and then our entire data will get lost. So to prevent that from happening, we are going to extract the data that the state is holding before emitting this posts loading state. And then we will pass this posts to this old posts, and while we are fetching the data from the internet, we will show the old posts in our list. This will of course make a lot more sense once you do it with me, so just hold on. And I'm going to have another variable. This one will be a boolean. I'm going to name this is first fetch. When the application launches, we will fetch the list of data from the internet, and while the data is being fetched, this posts loading will be emitted. And if this is first fetch variable is set to true, then we are going to show a circular progress indicator at the bottom of the screen. But once we have the first set of data and that data is scrolled to the bottom, and then we are making our next request, in that case this is first fetch will not be true, and we will show our circular progress indicator at the bottom of the screen. Now press Ctrl dot and create constructor for these final fields. And I'm going to surround this is first fetch with curly braces, and by default it will be set to false. It will be set to true only when we are making our first request to the network. And this is all of the states that we are going to need for this application. Now go to the posts underscore qubit. Here I'm going to create an integer variable named page, and that will be initialized with value 1. We are going to use this variable to fetch the correct set of data from the JSON Typicode server. As I already showed how it is going to work at the start of the video, if we set page as 1 and let's say limit as 15, then it will get us the first 15 results. And then after we have received the first 15 results, we will change the page to 2. And then when we make our next request with the limit 15, then we will get the next 15 results. That will be from 16 to 30. And in the same way, when the page is 3, then it is going to get us the next 15 results, and that will happen until we reach the end of the resource. And other than this, we also need an object of the repository, because our qubit will not be making any network request. It will ask the repository for the data. So create an object of the posts repository, press Ctrl dot on the constructor and add the final field there. In this qubit, I'm going to create a function named load posts that will fetch the data. And here the first thing I want to do is check if the state is already posts loading. If the state is posts loading, then we will return from this function. Otherwise, we will emit the state posts loading. Now here we have to pass the posts that are already being displayed on the screen, so that when this new state is emitted, we don't lose what we have on the screen. But how are we going to get the data that our posts loaded state is holding? We can access the current state of a qubit with this state variable. So create a variable named current state that will refer to the state of the qubit. And now I'm going to check if the current state is posts loaded. And above this condition, create another variable named old posts, and that will be initialized with an empty list of type post. But if our state is posts loaded, then this old post will refer to the post that is already being displayed on the screen. And now we can pass this old post to this post loading state. It also has this is first fetch boolean, and if our page is equals to 1, then it means that we are fetching the data for the first time, because after the data has been fetched, this page will increment to 2. And after emitting this posts loading state, we can ask the repository for the posts. So on the repository, I'm going to call the fetch posts function that we haven't created yet. This function will require the page. Press Ctrl dot and create this method. Now go to the repository. The repository will also not be making the network request. It is only going to model it. So it will require an instance of the posts service. Press Ctrl dot and create the constructor. This is going to be an async function, and the return type of this function will be a list of post. It will be a future list of post because we are fetching it from the internet. And if you do not know what this future is, then just watch a small video on YouTube and that will explain that. And now we will ask the service to get us the posts data from the internet. So here as well, I'm going to create a function named fetch posts, and it will also require the page parameter. Here I'm going to create a static const variable named fetch limit. This is the number of resource that we have to fetch at once, and I'm going to set it to 15. And along with this, I'm going to create another variable named base URL, which is going to hold the URL from where we want to fetch the data. And the URL is JSON placeholder.typicode.com/posts. So copy this and paste it here. We will also require to add the HTTPS here. And remember to put HTTPS and not HTTP, because by default HTTP is disabled by Android and iOS since it is insecure. There is a way to allow insecure HTTP, but I don't want to get into that in this video. So just put HTTPS here. This function will also be an async function. And I'm going to make the network request in a try catch. Inside the try block, create a variable named response. And we are going to make a get request to get the data. This get function is available in the HTTP package that we installed at the start of the video. And here we have to pass URI.parse. This parse function will require the link, which is base URL. And along with this, we also want to pass the limit and the page parameters. So limit is going to be fetch limit. We don't need this curly braces. And along with the limit, we also require the page. Now this is going to return a future response. So I'm going to put the await keyword to get the real response. This response has response.body, which is our data in JSON string. So we will have to convert that JSON string to JSON object. And we can do that with this JSON decode function that is there in Dart. Response.body. The data that we will be getting will be a list. So I'm going to cast this JSON decode to a list dynamic. And we are going to return this list dynamic from this method. And now make the return type of this fetch post from void to future list dynamic. And if any error occurs, then we are just going to return an empty list. Now go to the post repository. We are going to store the return value of this function in this posts parameter, and also add the await keyword since that's an async function and it is going to return a future. We have to convert this list dynamic to this list of post, and then we have to return it from the function. So posts.map, and this E is nothing but a JSON object that can be converted to a post object with this post.fromJSON object creator. And here pass the JSON, which is the element. And now we are going to cast this to a list, and then we will return it from this function. That's it from here. Now go to the post Cubit. And this value is going to be nothing but the list of posts. I'm going to rename this value to new posts. And once we have a new set of data, we are going to increase the page value. So when the load posts function is called for the next time, we get the next set of results. And now we can emit the posts loaded state with the new data that we have fetched. But if I pass this new posts here, then it will only show the new data that we have fetched and not what we already had, since this post variable is not going to hold that data. That data is stored in the posts loading state. So we are going to get the old data from this post loading state, and then we will add this new data to that old post data, and then we will emit that piece of data. So create a variable named posts and cast the state to posts loading. The state is going to be post loading because that is what we have emitted here. It cannot be anything else. And it has our old post. And now we can add the new data that we have fetched to this posts variable, and then we can emit this posts out. Now go to the main.dart, and here we have to provide the post repository to this post Cubit. So I'm going to make this pagination app dependent on the posts repository. Press Ctrl dot and create this constructor. And now from this run app, we are going to provide the repository to the pagination app. So create an object of the posts repository, and this posts repository requires an object of the posts service. So inside the parentheses, create an object of the posts service. And now we are going to go to the posts_screen.dart, and here we will write the code that will display all that data that we have fetched from the internet. To get the first set of data, we have to make a call to the load post function that we have in the Cubit. And I'm going to make a call to that in this build function. And to do that, I will require a reference to the post Cubit that we have passed to this posts view in the main.dart. Oh, I did not pass the repository here, so let me do that. So in the posts screen, we can get the access to that Cubit with this BLoC provider of context function. And here we have to pass the name of the Cubit that we want to get a reference to. Here it is posts Cubit, and we can get our first set of data by making a call to the load post function. Let me also start the emulator so that we can see what we are doing. The scaffold's body will be the post list, which I will get from a separate function, and I'm going to name it post list. Create that function. This will return a BLoC builder widget. So with the BLoC builder, we will be observing the states of the post Cubit, and based on the states, we will display different stuff on the UI. So return a BLoC builder. The name of the Cubit is post Cubit, and the state. Now create the builder function, which is going to have the context and the state. And now here the first thing that I want to check if the state is posts loading. And if it is post loading, then is it the first fetch? If it is the first fetch, then we are only going to show a circular progress indicator. So I'm going to return a loading indicator here. Create that function and make it return a circular progress indicator. This indicator will be in the center, so wrap it with center. And I'm also going to give it a padding, since the same indicator is going to be used at the bottom of the screen. So I want to have it some padding from the rest of the list. So wrap it up with a padding. And if the state is posts loaded, or if the state is posts loading but it is not the first fetch, then we will get the list of data that we have to show on the UI. So I'm going to create a list of post, import this model, and initialize this with an empty list. This posts will refer to the posts that we have in the post loaded state. It will refer to this list if the state is post loaded, and it will refer to the old post list if the state is posts loading. So in the posts screen.dart, here check if the state is posts loading. If it is posts loading, then the posts will refer to the old posts, and if it is post loaded, then it will refer to the posts. Right now we have this error because we are not returning anything, so that is all right. And now we are going to return a list view that will display all of our posts. And it is going to be a separated list view since I want to add a divider between every list item. The item count will be the number of items that we have in our list. So posts.length. And this separator builder function, let's implement that. First parameter is context and second is index. But it does not matter what it is, we are just going to return a divider from here. And the color of the divider will be colors.gray 400. And now let's implement this item builder. This function has the context and the second parameter is the index. And now with this index, we can get the correct value from this post list. And for that post object, we can create the UI. I'm going to create the post item in a separate function named post. And the first parameter here is going to be the post object. And the second will be the context. We will need the context in that function. Press Ctrl dot and create this method. This method will return a container and the width of this container will match the width of the screen. I'm also going to give this container a margin of 10. The child will be a column and the first child of this column will be a text. And the text will be the ID of the post and the post title. Let me also add a dot over here so it'll look a little better. This text will be stylized a little bit. So add the style property. The font size will be 18. Color will be black. And the font weight will be bold. And then I want to add a sized box of height 10. And below this, we are going to have another text that will be the body of the post. And this will have no style. And we can see our post data over here. If you're not able to get this result, then maybe try hot reloading. And if that also does not work, then maybe you have messed up in getting the data from the internet. So just make a few print statements and check if you're actually getting the data. But if you have the same results, then let's go ahead. I don't want this title to be aligned in center. So to make it left aligned, I can make the cross-axis alignment of this column to start. Now if I scroll to the bottom, then nothing happens. We are not getting the next set of results. We can implement that with a scroll controller. We can pass a scroll controller to this list view. And with the scroll controller, we can find out if the list has been scrolled to the bottom. So here at the top, create an object of scroll controller. I'm going to name this object scroll controller. And we will have to pass this scroll controller to the list view. And now we can write the code that will detect if the list has been scrolled to the bottom. And I will do that in a separate function. So let me first create the function and then I will show you where to make a call to that function. So create a function named setup scroll controller. And inside this, we are going to add a listener on the scroll controller. So if anything changes in the list view, then this function in this add listener will be called. And through this function, we can detect the state of the list view. So here the first thing that I want to check, if the scroll controller dot position is at H. So if the list view is at the bottom or if it is at the top, then only this condition will be true. Otherwise it is going to be false. And now inside this, I have to check if the list view is at the bottom because I don't want to fetch any data if it is at the top. And to do that, I can check the condition if the scroll controller dot position dot pixels is not equals to 0. This pixels will be 0 only if the list view is at the top, and if it is not at the top, then it is going to be at the bottom. We are sure about that because this is what that condition is for. This is checking if it is at the top or at the bottom. and this one is checking if it is not at the top. And if it is not at the top, then it is at the bottom. So if these two conditions are true, then we are going to make a call to the load post function. And this setup controller is also going to require the context. Now make a call to this function from this build method. By the way, if you have a stateful widget, then don't add these things over here. It should go in the init state that the stateful widgets have. Otherwise, very bad things will happen. Now let me restart the app. And now if I scroll to the bottom, the next set of results are already there. Now what is missing from here? Well, we have to show a circular progress indicator when it is fetching the next set of results. So how are we going to add another item to this list to show the loading indicator? Well, for that what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this item count by 1 if the state is loading. And in that extra item, I'm going to show my loading indicator. So here create a variable named isLoading, and it will be set to false by default, but it will change to true when the state is loading. And now in this item count, I'm going to check if it is loading, and if it is loading, then I am going to add 1, otherwise I'm going to add 0. And doing this will add that extra element that we will require to show the loading indicator. Now inside this item builder function, I'm going to check if the index is lesser than posts.length. If it is lesser than posts.length, then I'm going to show the post, and if it is greater than that, then I'm going to show the loading indicator. I think this should make sense. When the state is not posts loading, then this index will never be equal to or greater than this posts.length, and this loading indicator will not be called. But if it is loading, then this index will be equal to the post.length, since we have added this extra one over here. And in that case, if we return a loading indicator, then the loading indicator will be displayed at the bottom of the screen. Let me hot reload it and let's see if it is working. Yes, it is working, but we have an issue. The issue is that when we scroll at the bottom, then the loading indicator is not visible unless we scroll it a little bit more. So here what we have to do is we have to push the list view to the bottom after rendering this loading indicator, so we don't have to manually scroll it to see it. And to do that, we have this jump to function in our scroll controller, and with this we can pass the pixel at which we want to jump our list view to. Here we have to jump to the bottom, and to do that we have this scroll controller.position.max scroll extent. This max scroll extent will be equal to the height of the list view, the entire height, but the entire height is not going to contain the loading indicator since it has not been rendered. It is rendered after we return the loading indicator. What we can do here is we can provide a little bit of delay before jumping to the end of the list so that the loading indicator is added to the list view, and this max scroll extent includes this loading indicator. So I'm going to add a timer with a duration of maybe 30 milliseconds. I think that should be enough. Let me also import this timer. And inside this function, I'm going to make a call to this jump to function. Let me save and hot reload it, and let's see if it is working now. Yes, the loading indicator is automatically visible. Okay, so I guess this is it. If you have any doubts, then put it in the comments. I will answer them.